Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biodesign Now, where we'll uncover the latest visionary solutions shaping a greener today at the intersection of biology, design, art, and technology. Hosted by myself, biodesigner Akir, and artist and biodesigner Kirsten Tingle. And today, joining us on episode 3 of Biodesign Now is Debarati Das.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here.
Debarati is a product and strategic designer with a wealth of experience in textile design. I loved reading about all of your experience in textile design and indigenous craft communities and social design and sustainable textile design and scaling up. But more recently, she's been working in biofabrication and challenging our use of water and chemicals in the skincare industry with her graduate project, BactoBerries, which has been nominated for the Mullen-Lowe Global Award, the Nova Award.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you so
And
much.
congratulations on graduating as well.
Yes, freshly
Thank you
graduated.
so much.
So we're going to start with a little tradition we have, which is our quick fire questions. So to start with, what is the best organism that you've ever worked with?
I would say Lactobacillus bulgaricus.
Ooh.
Very
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, initially when I started with the biodesign, I was working with algae. So mostly it was with soil remediation or extracting pigments. Then I switched, because I love colors and I love working with textiles. So then I jumped to experimenting with bacterial dyes with J-Liv.
Mhm.
And then when I started the skincare project, I was working with, I would say, mostly 3 bacteria.
Mhm.
So the first one, which I worked the most, and fortunately it worked out, was Bacillus licheniformis.
Mhm.
So it's like a soil and environmental bacteria. And then during my research, I got interested in this particular bacterial biopolymer called Livan, which is more like a fructose. And it was kind of very sticky. And then, so I started working with that. And then I also worked with Lactobacillus bulgaricus. So the initial experiments were pretty fun because
Mhm.
I was trying to extract the bulgaricus. We didn't have that in the lab. So I was trying to extract the bulgaricus from all the yogurt samples and trying to identify it,
Mhm.
the colonies, and then trying to isolate the colonies. So the starting was interesting, and then I tried to grow it in large scale, and I did some encapsulation. So although I worked a lot with Bacillus licheniformis, and then I was able to form a connection with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
J-Liv didn't work like that. Like I had so many failures in J-Liv. It always got contaminated for some reason. But then Bulgaricus was
Yeah.
funny.
Okay. So
Yeah.
our next question was going to be, what is the worst organism that you've collaborated with?
Yes.
But will that be J-Liv?
Yeah, I would say kind of, to be honest. Because I was also speaking to one of my friend, and she's from Material Futures, Ilaria. She also got nominated and shortlisted for the Mullen-Nova. So, sorry. So she was also working with J-Liv initially. And then halfway through, she realized that this thing kind of, what should I call it? Basically, it evolves and it becomes much... I'm forgetting the exact word for it. But then she also faced the similar issues, which I kind of faced the similar issues. So yeah, I would say.
Okay.
What in nature is inspiring you right now?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Not J-Liv.
Not
No.
Not J-Liv.
No, not right now. I was like, okay, maybe after some time I'm gonna touch the J-Liv, but not right now. But I generally used to get, before coming here, I was very inspired with plants, the botanicals basically, because my parents, especially my father, has been a gardener. Like he's an engineer, but he has this passion for gardening. And right from the childhood, we used to have all kinds of roses, and he used to do grafting as well. So in order to
Wow.
get certain specific varieties and colors and textures in the plants. So although I never planted a single plant in my life, but then I was always inspired. Like I could literally see a flower and I can tell what's happening with that plant. And then I got so used to it. So that's how, even when I started working with sustainable design, I actually started with natural dyeing. That's how I started with sustainable design. So because I had some understanding of plants, and fortunately I come from a place which has a lot of flora, all kinds of flora. So that's how I started experimenting. And I think somewhere that was my beginning steps of how I wanted to go into biodesign. And later, like when I found out about the biodesign course, and then I realized, okay, I have worked with plants in all kinds of ways, but then there are microorganisms. That's something that I cannot work with in daily life. Like I can use my kitchen to extract fibers, I can extract colors, but microorganisms and biodesign, especially, they require that specific environment and specific equipments to get things done. So that was kind of like, I would say, the beginning steps. And also, like when I was working with plants and extracting colors or whatever, everything else, there was a symbiotic relationship that a plant has with microorganisms, be it algae, be it bacteria, be it fungi. And then, so without that, it was very difficult to even work with plants without having a focus on microorganisms to what is happening. Like, for example, I wanted to have a very specific color of marigold, or I wanted to have a specific production, in terms of production, the number or the quantity of marigold for natural life, for example. There was no way out where I could grow that plant without having a knowledge of the soil bacteria and the soil microorganisms. And that's when I realized that, okay, there is something which is beyond that also I need to explore in order to understand and fully, I would say, explore sustainable design.
That's a very clear kind of progression from sustainable design and plant-based dyeing through to biodesign. So that makes a lot of sense. But we'll definitely get to how you transitioned from your work in textiles all the way through to your work in skincare, actually. But before we get there, we're going to ask the last quickfire question, which is, what is your biggest biodesign pet peeve?
I don't have particularly anything like that, to be very honest. I mean,
this is good. This is good.
I don't have anything. Like, I don't try to bind myself to something. That's what I would say. So honestly, I don't have anything like that, like a pet peeve or anything.
Okay. So moving on to our first main question. First medium question. A very, very important one, especially because biodesign is such a new field, is what is biodesign to you? How would you define biodesign?
I mean, because you already said that biodesign is a very broad field and very vast field. And that's exactly the kind of challenge that initially I was facing when I was trying to explain what biodesign is. But then somewhere I felt like, especially in CSM, that we kind of focus ourselves, like at least we try to focus ourselves and have this boundary where we mostly work with microorganisms and we don't go towards more plants or fauna like that.
Like the macroorganisms.
The macroorganisms. We mostly work with microorganisms. And what I felt like, this is my personal opinion, is that we try to bring in not only just like byproducts of microorganisms or the microorganismic system, but how can we incorporate the livingness exactly? And that's something I read in one of the papers in which I think, I'm not sure, I cannot remember, but I think they are either they are researchers from UCL or Bartlett School, where they were talking about this livingness in product design. So I think for me, that is the path at least I would like to take, where I try to incorporate living organisms, and the term that we use for livingness, having the microorganisms or the organisms to be able to have what are the processes that actually make them alive as a part of design process or a part of the product itself. So that basically somewhere what I think is gonna be allowing the people, or the people who will be interacting with the product of the system in a very interesting way. Like, there's gonna be something like a breakthrough. I mean, I would rather say we are kind of going back to the history of how ancient people used to interact with the environment and the product, but also we are shifting towards the future, where we are kind of imagining how the new ways are going to be, because we have infrastructure now in which we can incorporate the livingness in very different ways. So it's going to open new doors and probably new ways of interacting. And it's going to be very honest, I feel it's going to be a very new chapter in behavioral science of
Interesting.
of humans and the environment at large. That's how I feel. If we push biodesign as a subject, or as a way or a thought process or perspective in design in the future.
So like livingness as this core element of biodesign that
Yes.
sets it apart, and then that, driving all these changes, as you were saying, and how people are going to relate to their built environment and the products and the systems that they engage with every day, whether it's, the clothes that you wear, or the services and products that allow you to live.
Exactly.
That is what will change us. But also, I think a really good point you made that I really liked was kind of the traditional and ancient ways of designing and being are informing where biodesign is going in the future in a very clear way, which I really liked. And so I wanted to get to know kind of what nature you were around as a child. But we know from your father and the roses. And it's interesting because you were talking about getting involved with plant dyes and natural dyeing in your career as a designer so far. And that seems to be like a very clear progression from the plants your father was growing to potentially dyeing textiles with those very same plants. So when you were just getting into design, was it textiles and was it natural dyes that you were interested in when you were, a teenager looking to the future?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I mean, now that I narrate it from now, like thinking about it now, but actually it was not the case when I started. Like, looking back, yes, everything connects and everything is making sense. But when I started, that's not how it was. I kind of wanted to do textile right from the beginning, because actually I was more interested in fashion. But so I applied for National Institute of Design. So it's one of the most prestigious design colleges in India. But during my foundation year, so in the foundation year of NID, what happens is you are exposed to not only like textiles, but you're
Mhm.
exposed to product design and communication design.
Oh.
Yeah, so it kind of like the first year kind of gives you an entirety of what design is all about. And we
Mhm.
were kind of, and this is still with me, like I would say it was hammered into our heads
Yeah.
that you are a designer. You should never confine yourself to, even if you're going for textile, even if you're going for product, you should never confine yourself to just that field, just textiles.
Oh.
So it was kind of hammered. And
Wow.
then I was like, okay, I want to go to textile. But even though I was more into fashion before, and I knew about Central St. Martin's like back even like in India back then, it was the internet was not even that great, especially the place that I used to live in. It's not like Delhi or Mumbai. It's not metropolitan. It's
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in the hills in southeastern state of Orissa. So it was more of indigenous communities, I would say. So I grew up around indigenous communities. I grew up around, handcraft, and I grew up around basically sustainable design in its purest form. And then, so when I got into textile design, and okay, design is something that I have to think of it as holistically. So somewhere the fashion part died out for me.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it was more about practicality. Like you have to think out of the box, but it has to be practical. It can be applied right now.
Yeah.
It cannot be like 100 years or 50 years into
Yeah.
the future. That's something that was, at least for me, it was not encouraged much.
Okay.
So, and then we had this module in which they taught us about natural dyeing. It was not a big module, but then somehow after my first class, I thought, okay, if these are the things that can produce colors, what about the other things that can produce colors? So I started, I would say, a bit more scientific experiments on changing with pH, the temperature,
Yeah.
and proportions, and also reagents, chemical reagents. And so I was doing some experiments, but then I went for my graduation project, and it was also not natural dyeing, but it was something else. Somehow COVID got it back for me.
Okay.
So when I was working on my first job, and that's when the COVID hit, I went back to my own place, and then there was nothing much to do except for the hills and the plants and TV. So I started walking around, collecting flowers from my garden, from the ecosystem there, and plants and roots and whatnot. And then I started re-experimenting. And then after COVID, when I went back to office, I showed like I had like 2 big files of natural dyes experiments. So I took, because I didn't have any experience with dyeing myself. So I went to he was the head of sustainability, and he supported me a lot in the company that I was working with. And I showed him, and I was like, you are the expert in dyeing, so can you please give me some advice on how can I do it? Like, how can I take it forward? He liked my work, and he sent me to the COO of the company, who was also looking after the research and development department of the company. And then I showed him my work, and then he was impressed, and he was like, okay, can you do it at an industrial scale for us? So that's when I learned the industrial scale part of it. So I would say these are the 2 major, I would say, instances in my life where I learned a lot about natural dyeing. And the third instant was, so we had this module even during my bachelor's about, I would say, it's called craft documentation, where you have to go to the craft and do field research, know about the craftsmen, people, everything. And I documented this particular craft, which I wrote a paper on about this very fascinating, in the local terms, it's called all dyeing. And then they had a very interesting process. And that's where somewhere biodesign also gets into, because they used cow dung so they didn't have this conventional modenting process or scouring process that we use for dyeing or even natural dyeing.
With like metals, like alum and stuff
nothing.
like that.
So
Okay,
they used cow dung for pre-treatment of the yarns. And somewhere that kind of stuck with me. Like, how do you use cow dung for pre-treatment? And somehow the pigments that you used to get, and they had a very different process of dyeing as well. And they were not using any moderns, even in the dyeing. And they got very rich pigment. Like,
wow,
it's that color, basically, the one that you see. It's like that deep of a maroon. That's the kind of pigment.
the football scarves on the wall.
Yeah, for anyone listening, it's this like very deep, bright red.
Yeah, like a maroonish, like an earthy red. Yeah.
Because natural dyeing is not as simple as just, boiling a flour and pouring the water over fabric. It gets very technical very, very quickly.
Very technical.
Yeah.
And then when I was doing a documentation and when I was looking at their historical samples, what they had, like, not everything was preserved, but there were some samples that were like 80 years old.
Oh, wow.
The color, I mean, I was like, I initially thought that, okay, these are either maroons or these are either like rustic, earthy reds and maybe coffee browns, because they were adding a little bit of rust nowadays. But the ancient one, the older one, was mauve in color.
Okay.
And it is the same pre-treatment process with cow dung that they were doing, and it kind of stuck with me, like, how do they actually achieve it with cow dung, basically? And then I won't say I have solved the puzzle completely, but I think a part of the puzzle is what I personally feel is the gut enzymes of the cow and the gut microbes of the cow, that kind of basically that breaks down cellulose into simpler forms. So that's the kind of trick that they use, where they kind of loosen the cellulosic structure of the yarns, and that becomes like...
So it's like this scoring kind of process that you would do with the textiles, and it allows the dye to get into the fibers because they're a bit loosened up by the enzymes.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
And actually, cow dung as a biomaterial is a really big thing.
Yeah.
This is actually the first time I've heard it in this context. Usually, I've heard of it being used in like architectural applications.
Yes.
Because it has like, antibacterial properties and temperature.
Yeah.
But that's super interesting. So biodesign was right there with you.
Yeah.
Like from the moment you were born.
From the moment I was born. It's just, it took some time to identify and connect with it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it was there. And cow dung is an architectural material, because these indigenous communities, they still use cow dung as a part of their paste that they apply to the walls. So it's so integral to them. And then there was a lot of, they are also kind of, I would say, going away from it somewhere.
Okay.
But then, they're still trying to preserve. Like there's this tough battle between should we preserve or should we just go to a different direction? But that's
wow.
I'm very curious about, now that you've trained in biodesign, you have your master's of biodesign.
Okay.
A master of biodesign.
Master of biodesign.
Oh my god, that's a big title.
Biodesign, as you've trained in London versus these indigenous craftspeople you grew up with who were doing these very sustainable, it seems very biodesign adjacent practices.
Yeah.
Which did you find was actually more sustainable or kind of more true to biodesign?
That's, there are so many factors to come to a point, to be honest. The thing is, what I felt is indigenous communities, they have a very different approach to life and also a very different lifestyle. So, that is also something I was trying to I was struggling when I was working on my graduation project as well. And also when I was writing this paper on, so the question was basically, how can biodesign help indigenous communities? How can we connect the past and the future?
Yeah.
but it's a very complicated, I would say it's very complicated to answer. Like what we are doing here is something that can really help, and has a potential to help the kind of lifestyle, the modern lifestyle that we live in.
Mhm.
But what they do is suitable for them.
Mhm.
It's not. It's very difficult to
Yeah.
go
Mhm.
the other way around. So if the modern biodesign, what we do here, if it has to go to indigenous communities, there needs to be a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of what I would say, learning and unlearning and teaching, and also familiarizing the indigenous communities, because not always it's the case that when the communities use a certain thing that they know, they have a complete knowledge of. A lot of these knowledge is being passed down from one generation to other, and sometimes if there is a break, so there's mostly oral, there's no written always. So they don't have always a complete knowledge of what's happening. And if we the kind of framework that we design our products, or at least we design our knowledge systems in biodesign, we talk about specific bacteria, how they work and things like that. If we tell this to an indigenous person, it's another big project and another path in itself. So even if I am making a certain product, like for example, the one I was doing with in my graduation project. And if I tell the indigenous communities, although they are using probably some product which has live bacteria and some probiotic properties, but to introduce something from us, that, okay, it's not coming from directly from a plant, but it is coming from a factory now.
Yeah.
But this has the same properties as that of the plants, is also a big task in itself. So
Like the cultural gap, I guess.
the cultural gap, the knowledge gap, and sometimes it's also familiarity.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They are familiar with plants, but they are not familiar with the modern products. Like, it's not a right statement that way, what I said, but yeah, there's some amount of familiarity that they need to have, which still lacks in many ways. So it's a very tough question to say in a black and white.
Yeah.
It's mostly
Yeah.
gray.
Yeah.
But I guess that is like whenever anybody is designing anything for a culture that they're not from, like you run into this exact same issue of
exactly.
like the familiarity of the object or service that
Yeah.
you design, right?
Yeah.
Or how people that come from a different life experience to you will interact with something that you've created in a completely different way as well. And people might think of your thing as having different uses to what you intended.
I'll give you an example. Like, for example, yogurt.
Yeah.
The indigenous communities also make yogurt. They have a
Yes.
very different way of making yogurt, of course, but then it has the Lactobacillus bulgaricus, for example, as a bacteria, as a probiotic bacteria in there. They would prefer applying that on their skin. And if I'm giving it in the form of a skincare which has probiotic, it's the same bacteria, but in a different format. It becomes a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you come up with the BactoBerries project? Because it is obviously it's biodesign and it incorporates livingness, and there is obviously the connection to like yogurt, things like you were saying that exists and that people are familiar with, but it's not textiles.
It's not.
It's a very big. It's a very big jump.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? So this is a project that it challenges our use of water and chemicals in hygiene.
Yeah.
And it's envisioned for, well, a looming world of water scarcity, right?
Yeah.
So it's skincare and hygiene products that can be used without water,
Yeah.
and I have probiotic functions and
Yeah.
incorporates the skin
Yeah.
microbiome
Yeah.
and the skin gut microbiome.
Yeah.
So how did we get from textiles to there last year when you were thinking about what you're going to do?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, although I love textiles and I have mostly worked with textiles, but I also I wanted to try a hand in, first of all, product design in certain way. But I was not sure what. And then when I was having a conversation with one of my mentors, he's still back in India, and then we were just going through what could be possible to actually do that biodesign can make a difference. I was working with JLive and I was trying to see if there's any way I can work around with bacterial pigments, and then I realized there's a lot been worked around already in bacterial pigments. So something that needs to be picked up that's very personal, but it needs immediate attention at the same time. So, and because I also suffer a lot from skin ailments and also from this issue initially with the issues of hygiene, because I had a very different lifestyle back then. And I realized that, yes, I mean, most of like my bathroom looks like just products, like hygiene
Yeah.
products. And I remember my friend when she came in and then she saw my bathroom. It's a small bathroom, and she's like, "Wow, that's a lot of products." I said, "Yeah, but then they are all essential. They do something. Like it's not. I don't have the. I don't. I'm not of one of those people who buys a lot of hygiene products because it's popular or because it's beautiful or something like that." And then I realized that yes, that's one. There's first of all, there's a lot of products. There's a lot of packaging that's happening in my bathroom, and at the same time, none of the products can be utilized without water. So
Yeah.
I need to have water. So one day what happened was I live in student accommodation, and then there was some issue with the plumbing, and there was no water. Like there was some water, but then not water enough to shower or anything for 3 days straight.
3 days.
Yes. And then I have products. Okay. Now I can go and get some wipes, and there are some products in the market that's possible. But then check at the back of the product, it's like this big label of what are the chemicals, and half of the chemicals I can't even pronounce. Like it's beyond me. So I realized, okay, this is going to be one of the things that needs attention and has a lot of potential. And also I come from India, in like India has vast ecosystem, like there's deserts, there's hills, there's beaches, like everything. And I have also been in with communities who do not have much access to water. I have lived in places where water is a big issue. So that's where it's like a lot of points that connected together that drove me, okay, maybe this is one of the direction that I want to take. But I was clueless when I started, to be honest. I had no clue because I didn't have any background in skincare, or I knew some things about product design, but that's still vast and that's still a lot to conquer and to understand. So that was one hell of a journey for a year.
But as your professors said, you're not just a textile designer. You are
a designer.
Full stop, right?
Yes. So every time, like, oh no, I mean, every time I try to give this reason that, not even now, like even back in my bachelor's, I'm like, no, but I'm mostly a textile designer. Like, no, you are a designer. You should be ashamed if you just if you just confine yourself to textiles. You are a designer. That's your job to solve problems. Otherwise, you're not a designer. So yeah.
I love whenever there's like a sense of ethics and importance for like design or art fields, because I think it's so important, and we kind of, it's not always taught, but I think you're right. It's like, no, you have a responsibility. You have to make something useful or fix something or make things better.
Yes. I mean, that's how the day one orientation of my bachelor's started.
Nice,
you
very
are
nice.
a designer. You have to fix a problem.
Yeah. So like that really strong element of responsibility.
Yes.
But it seems like the project has evolved from a lot of personal
Yes.
experiences.
Yes.
You know, from all different times in your life
Yes. Yes.
to the trauma of student accommodation.
Yeah.
All of those things came together
Yeah.
to create what you're going through, what you were going to develop. And it wasn't even the first idea that you had, right? That you were talking about the J-Live.
Yeah. That's
so
not a first idea. I was like, okay. I mean, something needs. This was something that needed more attention, to be honest. And there was this issue that I was reading in the newspapers about. I mean, India kept having some water-related issues time on time, but recently, that's something even I didn't like. I was kind of out of touch of the news from India somewhere, but then suddenly it came up that okay, so there is this city in Bangalore in India which is having this water crisis, and then it's like people don't have water really. Like they are purchasing water and like very exorbitant prices and stuff like that. And then I was talking to one of my, like, I have a lot of friends who used to live in Bangalore in that particular city in India. And they were like, you know, we actually have to ration water. Like we have to plan if we are taking a shower now.
Wow.
So this is the amount of water we are left with for
Yeah.
so and so time to do our dishes and wash our clothes. So that kind of somewhere propelled me. I mean, that was in between the graduation project. Like I was all the time I was thinking about, you know, places like dry areas like desert and in Africa, you know, things like that. But I realized that there's something that's also very close to me, but that's happening. Kind of gave validation to what I was doing. That okay, I'm not being insane.
So this was when you had already started developing the project,
yeah.
and this confirmation was coming in
Yeah.
that this project is addressing crises that are not just impending but are happening right now.
Because initially the ideas was mostly like, okay, there are poor communities, there are other communities who are very, very distant from plumbing systems and infrastructure, who don't have water, or they are in refugee camps, or they are homeless. So, or maybe like space expeditions. That was far off for me at that point. But like when I was thinking, these are the communities and the people and the population that was coming to my mind. But when I did a bit of deeper research, that okay, I realized that people like us, bless you. So people like us, like in general, and also my friends, they are facing the same crisis. It's not something that was very distant for me anymore. It's something that was right there for me.
Yeah.
So it kind of gave, I would say, validation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how exactly does it work? Take us through the product, how you use it, and then biologically how it functions.
Okay, so the product is kind of, so that was another of a big crisis myself that I was going through. That how do I want my product to first look like? And then I was thinking that I don't want it to look like all the products that I have in my washroom. I don't want it to look like something conventional, because my initial plan when I started with this project was with the question of, why do I need so many products in the first place? Like, I know that our skin, our body has a microbiome. There are millions and millions of all kinds of microorganisms. Like there's bacteria, there's fungi, there is viruses, and all like not species, but all kinds of strains doing different things, very complex but very nuanced things in our body. So what does these products exactly do? And what if we eliminate it? Because the history in history, people didn't have access to so many products, so many ingredients, but somehow we survived for so long. So there must be something that we are missing right now, or we don't want to identify, or we don't want to connect with it anymore. So when I started with, my focus was, okay, skin microbiome. So skin microbiome. And then I was like, okay, we can explore the field of probiotics. And then, but then it came to this whole question of how do I want my product to look like? How do I want my product to feel like? Now, when I was interviewing people and I was telling them, I'm going to completely, for example, I completely eliminate water from your hygiene process. You're not able to wash your face or wash your hands. How are you going to feel? That was a very uncomfortable suggestion to people.
I mean, thinking about it right now,
Yeah,
it sounds
behavioral
uncomfortable.
change is so tricky.
Yeah. They're like, that is going to be very difficult because I was thinking of making it as a part of our daily life. I was getting suggestion that, okay, when we go for hiking or when we go to, places like that, when we go for camping, it's very difficult there. So that product can be targeted there. But there needs to be something that has to be there for our everyday lives. And that was a very uncomfortable thing for people. So I wanted my product, and the other factor is if I'm working with probiotics that I had at the back of my mind, I cannot make people compare these two products and their results. It's not possible to have probiotics which is competing with conventional skincare and hygiene products. So it should not only look very different, anyway it's functioning very different.
Yeah.
So it has to also look very different. It has to have its own narrative, its own story, and its own appeal, so that people try to look for an experience which is different from what a conventional routine cycle that has been embedded in our heads have. So I started to make it kind of get inspired from how fruits would look like. I was looking for packaging solutions and how I want it to be packaged and then sent it across to people. And then, yeah, because I didn't want that format to be the same. So I thought how, like, something unrelated, but also something very relatable. So that's where the idea of fruits came in. Like if I'm packaging, and initially the idea was to package very different things in one product, because I was thinking, okay, it should have an edible element as well. It should also have something that can be applied on this part of the skin, or maybe the face, maybe the body. So different kind of creams or different kind of hygiene solutions, but in one product. And then I was trying to get some inspiration, and then I realized that maybe fruits can be a way to go, because they package very different things in one format. And then somewhere it's also not gonna look, I mean, it's definitely gonna look very different from a traditional product, but it's also gonna be something a little familiar there. So it's a bit of balance between unfamiliarity and familiarity.
Because they're like these orbs.
Yes.
And I feel like a sphere is a very comforting shape.
Yeah.
It inspires familiarity. Definitely. It's the softest shape that you could have.
Yeah.
But it's
also
alive.
Alive. And it's like a widely available, or I would say it's a very common shape in nature.
Yeah.
In the first place. It not only kind of like the orb kind of thing, which I make, which I call it, the pods, basically, the BactoPops. I call them BactoPops. So inside an orb like like packaging, a lot of people, when I was talking to them, they kind of related because of the color and the mixing of different colors.
They're very colorful.
Yeah, they're very colorful. They kind of they were trying to connect it with bath bombs.
I really see that actually.
Yeah. Like, oh, this kind of looks like bath bombs.
They really do, yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, just try to open it. And they open it, and they are these tiny, those spears, the pops basically, which I call it, the probiotic pops, skincare pops, which I made. And they kind of like it. Like it's fun for them. It's like
It's
Mhm.
so nice to like delight people with the experience of using a product.
yeah. It's like there's some kind of surprise on their face. There's some kind of interest that what is it what it is, and then so so the idea of the product, as I was telling you, that it was divided into many sections, to be honest, my entire research. So one segment of my project was material development. The second segment of my project was skincare product development, which I didn't do any, I would say, uh, apart from the probiotic part, I still have a long way to go for the formulations because they are still at a very initial stages. I just made a formulation which is
The recipes.
some
Yeah.
recipes, but it's not still tailored enough. I would say there's still a lot of research that I need to do. So there was material research, there was this skincare and the formulation research, and there was this behavioral research. How would people react? And then fabrication process.
Yes.
So there was, and then finally, that was communication, how people would react to it. And during the show, everybody kept taking away my brochure. So
Yeah, I think by the time I arrived,
there was nothing. Yeah. So because I treated our final graduation project exhibition to be the testing ground of an
Very
idea.
nice.
Yeah.
Just sort of an experiment in
Yes,
public.
Yes,
It
experiment.
is.
Like, how do people react to an idea like this? And now that they have a prototype in front of them, I still consider it to be at a very conceptual stage, to be very honest. Like, there's a lot that needs to be done, but it's still an idea. And I want people, firstly, to be familiar with that idea, that this future that we are anticipating is not very far, and it's not something that's alien. It can happen.
It's here
And
today
this-
already.
Yes, it's here today already in other parts of the world. And then if that happens, and if you have a product that kind of looks like this kind of works differently, how would you, like, are you going to appreciate it? Are you going to question it? How is it going to be? So for the material phase, and then this is also kind of very complicated. To be honest, there is no straight linear path in my research or in my design process because a lot was informed because there's a lot of systems and was involved in making a product and then conceptualizing a product. Like, for example, when I was thinking of, okay, what the material is going to be for my packaging and what the ingredients are going to be there as a part of my formulation, it all came down to the different kind of plant extracts and animal extracts or even extracts from microorganisms that are the part of the process. But then if I'm envisioning a product where I'm trying to say that, okay, I want to eliminate water, I want to save water, I want to eliminate water from the hygiene process. So I have to figure out a way which is not going to impact the remaining plants or growing plants or, those expensive kind of process or water intensive processes. So that's when the idea came for material development that, okay, what if I use a combination of a bacterial material for its properties, and I use food waste as a part of the shell material or the packaging material. So even for the food waste, I went with something which is very common, like eggshell waste, which is like available, or orange peel waste. So the waste can be directed as the major part of the content,
Like the packaging.
the exterior packaging,
Okay.
because it has that property that it can protect the fragile
Yes.
product inside. And then I used the bacterial levain that I was talking about from the Bacillus licheniformis, because during my research I realized that although levain is not something which is very new to science, but this bacterial levain, there's a lot of interest currently. So there's because sorry, so it has these properties which can be applied in various fields. So it's there in pharmaceuticals. It's a part of cosmetic industry.
Yeah.
Because it can be a part of formulation, it can be a part of wound healing treatment in especially in the biomedical
Okay.
fields. So it's like, and it's edible as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Can
It's
you eat it?
Yes,
Oh,
because
so-
I think they
okay.
use it. I think that it's already been used as emulsifier and
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
for the
okay.
taste, because it's fructose, so it's already been used as food. So it has this.
Yeah.
It's like a superpower.
It's very versatile.
Very versatile.
So in your project, when it is on your skin, what happens?
So it acts as a prebiotic. So
Yes.
it gives nutrition to the skin itself, and it acts as a moisturizer. It acts as a natural moisturizer.
Okay.
So if it's acting as a prebiotic, it's already creating a certain kind of environment for specific strains to thrive, and not all the strains to thrive. So the
Okay.
good bacteria that we need thrives because of a certain quantity of Levan application. So Levan became not only a part of my skincare formulation, but it also had that encapsulating properties, because I was trying to do micro encapsulation with my probiotic bacteria.
Yeah.
So it acts as an excellent. It also has an excellent encapsulation property. So it became a part of that. So I was trying to explore Levan in the most possible ways that it can be. And then I used Levan, that I was trying to experiment that how would Levan act as a part of the material itself. Now, these are the formulations, but how it will act as a material itself. So I did two of the material experimentation. So one was with starch. So the starch which I used was, I'm not sure how it happens in the West, but we generally, like, especially the place where I belong to, we drain out the excess water from the rice. When we cook the rice, we cook it with a lot of water, and then we drain out the excess water from the rice. So it has a lot of starch in it. So I combined a bit of plasticizers and then bacterial levain to have one material, which I later used for making my sachets, because I wanted to make some sachets, and then I needed something which would hold. Now, that was something which I was having a lot of conversation and then disagreements with a lot of people, because I was trying to make a material which not only breaks down as soon as like it's used, but it also holds the product and the
Before you actually
formulation
use it, yeah.
before we use it
Yeah.
and during the transportation. So it's like two crossroads meeting.
Yeah.
It's completely like two separate things meeting in one point to an extent, but at a conceptual level, I was able to achieve it, but it still needs a lot of work there. So I used the starch material for my sachets, and I tried with another material, which is bacterial levain, and I use psyllium husk. So psyllium is kind of, so it's kind of like a grain that
Okay.
generally, at least in India, there's this company called Isabkul. So Isabkul kind of produces this husk. I mean, it's basically a plant husk, but then they package it and then they sell it. So it's basically used as, so when somebody has a constipation, so it adds that fibers
Yeah. Okay.
for
Okay.
them.
Important.
Important.
Yeah.
Yes. So all these, and the chia seeds and the flax seeds, so the mucilages from all these seeds. So I use the mucilages and the bacterial levain and a bit of cellulose as well to hold it together. And then I made the film. So now I had three separate materials which had three separate properties. And then I was trying to see what are the different kinds of prototypes or concepts that I can create. So one was that of the sachet. And then, so initially when I was also making, people realized, like, that was the feedback I got from everybody, that, okay, these are mostly very formulation based. but we also need something to as an exfoliator.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
like what are we going to use? Like we have scrubs now, but these don't look like scrubs. So then I had to incorporate a combination of a sachet and an exfoliator. So the idea of the design, like the segment which I called it Bactopods. Basically,
Yes.
it's like a sachet. So it's like a combination of an exfoliator with the sachet. So the exfoliator and the shape, basically the form, was inspired from a cross section of a cactus. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a cross section of the cactus. So the part which can be held and can be used an exfoliator is basically, I don't know what it is called. Maybe you can add on to it. It's, you have those shapes in the cactus which has thorns in it and which has the ridges and
Yeah.
the portions which is protruding out.
Yeah.
So that became the inspiration that had
The texture for the
texture, the
exfoliation
form,
properties.
basically. Yeah, the
Okay.
form of it, because it had a part of it like as a part of a, like a backbone of it, which um and then it had like something like ridges inside. So that portion became a place where you can hold it with your between your two fingers. And then that became the exfoliator and the sachet, and it was hollow from inside, and the sachet became the face of it. So so when you arrange it together, it kind of resembles, I wanted it to resemble a little bit of cactus, like a cute cactus.
Yeah, there is a huge amount of attention to detail in this project where, you know, the different properties of all of these biomaterial formulations that seem really complicated, like all of these different waste streams and, you know, bacterial outputs together into these biomaterials at the different levels of the packaging, the sachets, the actual, you know, bioactive skincare product itself. And they all have multiple functions as well.
They have multiple.
And they're all like, you know, not toxic.
And
function without water is incredible. So
that was too much.
So now that you've
You
come
set yourself a
so
high
far,
bar.
yeah, you've done so much. What would be like a dream project for you? Would it be something where you can, you know, really tackle an issue at so many levels like this? Would it be something similar?
Of course, to be very honest, because I mean, that's when I was working for different companies and I was doing my internships. That's what I realized, that design, even if it's a single product, it is not an isolated thing. There's always all kinds of systems, all kinds of stakeholders. They're all interconnected with it, and it's more like a dynamo, I would say. Like if you press something like a button somewhere, something else pops up.
Yeah.
So it's not something I would want to, but that is
You'd have to.
inevitable.
Yeah.
That's inevitable.
That's what's required.
Yeah, that is what required.
Would it be a skincare product or a textile product, or would it be something different?
I don't know, to be honest.
Do you have any fields that you're looking to that you're like, okay, now I want to do a product in, you know, a project in architecture next, or with cow dung next?
Oh God, not sure. I mean, I'm still thinking about it because I really like the idea of working with materials. So
Yes.
with this project, at least, I was pushing that boundary, that from textile materials to materials at large.
Yeah.
So colors and materials are the two broad fields that I would either like to combine or I would like to work with. Like either it's a combination of both, or it's going to be purely material centric or color centric.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure how far I can take the BactoBerries project, to be honest. But for me, the target when I'm designing has always been a product that is usable, that is viable, and that can be reproduced and also scalable enough. Currently, during my graduation project, I was not able to achieve it. Like it's still at a very conceptual level. There's still a lot I need to push forward. And to be honest, I would like to see it develop more from a concept to an actual product. And I'm pretty sure it's going to look very different. I hope I'll be able to retain the essence of
Yes.
BactoBerries. But yeah, that's something I still have at the back of my head that I want to take it forward to.
What is the next step? The next step in development of BactoBerries?
There's actually a lot of steps, to be
I can
honest.
imagine.
I mean, I think first step for me would be working on the formulation
Okay.
of the probiotic and see,
Improving that.
yeah, improving that. The second would be the material. I have to make a lot of improvements and a lot of changes in materials, and probably it might go into reiteration phase. I'm pretty sure. And after doing that, there's also this big, huge, I would say, gap in where how do you place a probiotic skincare first of all? Like probiotic skincare itself is a challenge in itself.
Like you almost
In
have
the
to
market.
make awareness
Yeah.
for it and make the
Yeah.
product
Yeah.
at the same
Yeah.
time.
So the cultural stamp that it has to make,
Yeah.
that has to be
Yeah.
envisioned,
Yeah.
as well as the
Yeah.
materiality needs
Yeah.
to be perfected.
And then at the same time, I'm also talking about hygiene, which does not require a product that does not use water. So I'm pushing people to adapt to
Provocative.
provocative. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying people to, be accepting of the idea that you cannot be washing your face and hands. Probably it's gonna be tough for you in the future. So it's like there's still it's like a field in itself that needs to be explored. So I am currently very overwhelmed with it.
Yeah. I'm overwhelmed now too. But there's a lot. It seems like there's a lot of really interesting and fun experiments that can be done with this in the future.
There's a lot of fun experiments
Yeah.
to be done.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, as per our closing tradition,
Yes.
we'd like to ask you, to whom
Or to what?
would you like to dedicate this conversation to?
Okay. I would actually like to dedicate it to my mentor, Vikram. Yeah, G.A. Vikram, because he has been very closely monitoring my progress, and I have had hours of conversations and hours of to and fro brainstorming with him. And then he was basically being a person who would challenge the idea at every step so that I do not leave any loopholes when
Yeah.
I'm conceptualizing an idea. So I would like to dedicate this project to him. And secondly, my parents, to be honest. Like, you cannot leave the parents out. I
Yes.
was like, if my parents wouldn't have supported me to be here, I would have never been, first of all, able to do the project. I would have never been a part of CSM in the first place. So they have a major, major contribution to what is happening and what I'm doing right now. So these are the three people, to be
Yeah.
honest.
That is beautiful.
Wow.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so good, to be honest, talking.
We think you're doing really good, amazing.
Oh my
important
gosh,
Thank you
things.
yes.
so much, because I felt my project was so heavy in itself. And I think this is for the first time that I'm having such an in-depth conversation about all the complexities that project has and that I have been through and then I still have to go through. I think this somehow summarizes my project really well. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you too.